The man's child had passed away long ago, but how could there be a child's voice in the house? To find out, he went to the nursery on the second floor. What should have been a doll had turned into a child. What secret was hidden behind this? The man's name was Matty. Days ago, his child had suddenly passed away. To comfort his wife, they spent $100,000 hiring a nanny to take care of a fake baby doll. When this nanny faced the fake baby, she treated the doll with all her heart, as if it were a real life. She spoke softly and smiled warmly. Such dedication and compassion were truly admirable. Her professionalism as a nanny. As his wife left home to work, the male lead could no longer tolerate it. He decided to reveal the truth to the nanny. Originally, after the child's unfortunate passing, the wife fell into deep sorrow. She was on the brink of a mental breakdown. To help her overcome the shadow, they chose this special method to maintain hope in their lives with a fake doll. However, the nanny's reaction after learning the truth was unexpected. She remained calm and composed. This shocked the male lead. During the nanny's absence, he quietly checked her personal belongings. Unintentionally, an object pricked his finger. He discovered that it was a carefully crafted straw doll. This deepened his suspicions even further. That night, he found that the nanny had hung the doll by the window of the fake nursery. This action made him feel deeply uneasy. The protagonist told his wife everything. However, the wife seemed to understand the nanny's strange behavior. The next morning, the couple took the fake baby out. Meanwhile, the nanny upstairs was behaving somewhat strangely. After watching them leave, she changed into the mistress's clothes and put on her jewelry. When the couple returned home, the husband naturally took the fake baby from his wife's arms. However, as soon as his wife left, he immediately threw the fake baby onto the floor. The nanny upstairs witnessed this scene. The husband clearly sensed something was wrong. Realizing his mistake, he quickly picked up the fake baby to cover up. The next day, the nanny took a leave of absence due to unforeseen circumstances and asked the husband to look after the baby temporarily. However, not long after the nanny left, Matty heard the sound of a baby coming from the intercom. This made him break out in a cold sweat. The child had passed away days ago. He suspected it was an illusion and decided to go to the nursery to confirm. The moment he opened the door, an astonishing thing happened. The fake baby had turned into a real infant. Matty was instantly panic-stricken. When his wife returned home, she appeared unusually calm. This made Matty feel increasingly uneasy. He confronted the nanny, questioning her about the baby's origins, but the nanny remained composed, claiming that the baby was indeed Matty's child. This made Matty suspect that it might be related to the strange doll. He decided to destroy the doll in an attempt to uncover the truth, so he threw the doll into the shredder. At midnight, Matty attempted to take the baby out to uncover the truth. However, when he entered the fire alarm system password, it repeatedly showed an error. Finally, the alarm blared loudly, frightening the baby in his arms. The baby's cries disturbed his sleeping wife. Strangely enough, his wife entered the same password, and the alarm sound miraculously disappeared. Faced with his wife's questions, Matty spun a lie to calm the misunderstanding. This series of strange events felt like a dream, leaving Matty filled with confusion. Afterward, he carefully examined the nanny's personal information, but still couldn't find any clues. He sought help from his brother-in-law, hoping they could solve this problem together. When the brother-in-law saw the baby, he was equally stunned and speechless. Matty explained the situation in detail. The two of them unanimously focused their attention on the nanny. Believing she had significant suspicions, he instructed his brother-in-law to investigate whether there had been any recent cases of missing white infants. The nanny found that the doll was damaged, and then rewove it with her own hands. Coincidentally, that day was the brother-in-law's birthday. The wife planned to organize a surprise, which was to introduce the nanny to the brother-in-law. Originally, the brother-in-law was curious about her and decided to learn more. During the dinner shared by everyone, Matty felt discomfort in his throat. He coughed continuously but couldn't bring anything up, so he tried to remove the foreign object with his hand. To his surprise, it was a long, sharp thorn. The wife was about to take the birthday cake out of the fridge, but when she touched the cake with her hand, she was frozen in that moment. Time seemed to stand still. Just then, the husband arrived. He complained about the thorn he had just removed. As he approached his wife, he noticed something was wrong with her. The brother-in-law came to check on the situation, but was stopped by Matty, telling him not to act rashly. Matty softly called his wife's name, but she didn't respond. A baby's cry awakened her, bringing her back to her senses from her daze. The pain of losing her child was already imprinted in her heart. On one night, the brother-in-law decided to assist Matty in uncovering the nanny's mystery. He arranged for a private detective to investigate the nanny's true identity. However, when Maddie was about to take out the photos. To his surprise, the items had vanished without a trace. In desperation, he used his phone to secretly take a picture. While the nanny was asleep, the nanny's sleep quality was very good. Facing the sudden flash of light, she remained blissfully unaware, lost in her dreams. That day, after witnessing Maddie skillfully gutting a live fish, the nanny was so scared that she lost consciousness and fainted on the spot. However, in just a few days, the nanny seemed to have changed completely. She even started handling fish herself. Her vigorous handling methods startled even the chefs. Soon, the brother-in-law brought new developments. They traced the nanny's hometown. Unfortunately, a fire had reduced her home to ashes, leaving only charred remains. Nevertheless, they found a clue in the ruins, which was a straw doll identical to the one in Maddie's home. This made Maddie even more suspicious of the nanny. That night, the brother-in-law found the nanny to clarify the source of all these strange events.
If you want to get to Dorothy, you're gonna have to go through me.
But the nanny ignored his questions. She uttered a few puzzling remarks. The nanny asked the brother-in-law if he was present at the time, and if he had seen anything. The nanny's seemingly strange words struck deep at the brother-in-law's heart. After Maddie returned home, the brother-in-law pulled him aside to show him a bizarre video. In the cemetery, there weren't only gravestones for the nanny's parents, but also a gravestone with the nanny's name on it. The brother-in-law stated,
"Innocent little girl you've got up there. She stole the identity of a dead kid."
That the high-end nanny Maddie hired for $100,000 had assumed the identity of a deceased person. To thoroughly uncover the truth, he sneaked into her room while the nanny was busy cooking. Maddie found a hidden corner and set up a surveillance camera. Just when he thought the task was complete, the nanny came upstairs carrying hot meals. He quickly hid in the bathroom. From then on, Maddie used this camera to closely monitor the nanny's daily activities. That night, Eliza made a request for the nanny to help watch the child and attend the work gathering the next day to show her colleagues the child's adorable face. However, Maddie disagreed with this idea. He believed the child was too young to be exposed. In reality, the real reason behind this was that the child is not his biological child. By the next morning, the nanny suddenly appeared in front of them. Eliza screamed in fright. She had dressed up carefully to join Eliza's work gathering, unaware that the couple had canceled their plans. The nanny had been looking forward to it, but upon hearing Eliza say the plans were canceled, she stood there, looking utterly dejected. That day, Maddie had a sudden thought. He began to speculate that when the nanny arrived at their home, the baby had been hidden in her suitcase, and after she married a close relative and had a child, to escape rumors, and to earn money to raise the child, she came to their home to work as a nanny. The brother-in-law felt deeply concerned about his brother-in-law's unusual mindset. The nanny seemed to have an influence on Maddie, leading him into confusion and chaos. As night fell, Maddie opened up to the nanny and shared their difficult journey of trying to have a child. Several pregnancy test sticks with different names written on them on the bedside table in their room confirmed this. However, the nanny didn't respond when she heard those words. This made Maddie feel awkward. As the night deepened, after confirming that everyone was asleep, she cautiously stepped into the living room. Her gaze fell on a videotape. It was an interview featuring a girl. The girl happened to be in the same city as her. They even had the same name. Watching the girl in the video twirl her finger repeatedly, the nanny unconsciously twirled her own finger. Was there some subtle and complex relationship between them? After returning to the bedroom, the nanny repeatedly slapped her own back alone, as if punishing herself. Not long ago, she met her first friend here, a woman who claimed to be the neighbor next door, named Wanda. When the nanny went out for a walk with the baby, she discovered that the front door was open. She hurried inside to check what was going on, and accidentally left the cradle outside. Wanda and her sister brought the cradle back. This greatly increased the nanny's fondness for her. The two quickly became close friends. They soon became best friends. But while the nanny was playing hide and seek with Wanda's sister, upon hearing the heavy and hurried footsteps, she quickly got up to find the source of the sound. The girl, looking terrified, told the nanny that a man had just run down the stairs and out the door. The next day, when the nanny went to search for her friend at the address, the woman who opened the door said that she didn't know Wanda at all. It turned out that the friend didn't live there at all. She noticed under her feet the graffiti that Wanda and her sister had drawn. When she met each other yesterday, the lies were exposed. She realized she had been deceived. That same night, Eliza asked the nanny to buy her a cake in the rain. The nanny gladly agreed. She got soaked in the rain and took nearly an hour to buy the cake in return. However, when she happily brought the cake to Eliza's room door, unmentionable sounds came from inside. The nanny's heart was filled with mixed emotions. She felt as if she had been fooled. Back in her room, the nanny gently wrote Eliza's name on a page. Then she clasped her hands together and began to pray. The next morning, when Eliza woke up, she was surprised to find a huge blister on her lips. As a live reporter, her biggest fear was that something would happen to her pretty face. That night, the nanny inadvertently overheard a conversation between Maddie and the brother-in-law. The latter even said that if he were the master, he would turn off the heating in the nanny's room to prevent her from having a good life. Upon learning of the prank plan, she, filled with anger, wrote Maddie's name on the side of the book. Then she silently prayed again. A new day began. As the nanny just opened her eyes, the bed was filled with crickets scurrying around. This made her furious, but these were the ingredients Maddie had prepared, so she held back her anger and collected all the crickets into a jar to return them to the cellar. However, when she hurried downstairs, she saw a long thorn sticking out of Maddie's neck. It felt as if her pent-up resentment had been released, but even more unacceptable things were yet to come. The nanny always loved to eat tomato soup from cans, so she bought a lot to keep in the kitchen. That day, when she tried to heat one up, the can emitted a foul odor. She threw it away. In the trash can, she found a dog food can. The nanny was puzzled and angry, unable to understand why she was treated this way. At this moment, Wanda came to visit with a girl. The nanny suppressed her anger and prepared food for them. However, a dramatic scene unfolded. The girl suddenly collapsed on the floor.
You don't live on the street, do you, Wanda? Who sent you? Who told you to be my friend?
It wasn't until Wanda mentioned the brother-in-law's name that the nanny helped administer an allergy shot to the girl. She finally solved the mystery. Everything pointed to the brother-in-law. As night fell, Maddie looked at the crickets and surprisingly asked the nanny to taste one. A hint of mystery gleamed in the nanny's eyes as she recalled the ancient fable her aunt had told her. If crickets appear in the house, it signifies that ominous signs are approaching. Before Maddie fully understood the words, the nanny swallowed the cricket. Then, Maddie brought in a pile of crickets. After entering the room, the nanny grabbed a whip from the table and began to whip her own back again, as if punishing herself. At this moment, the crickets that died under the blanket has actually resurrected. Then, a mysterious letter was delivered to the nanny. It says, "Found you." Soon after, a ragged, soaked man quietly visited.
Well, let's have a proper look at him.
The man's leather shoes were severely cracked, and with every step, water seeped out. After taking off his shoes, he stood on the floor with mud-covered feet. The man was holding Eliza's child in his arms, as if he was very familiar with the child. After Eliza hurried home, she saw the old, worn-out shoes on the floor, and realized there was an uninvited guest in the house. She quickly walked in to check. The nanny introduced her Uncle George. The man handed her a strange wooden doll as a gift for their meeting. The doll, like Maddie, was dressed in a chef's outfit. George explained that the doll was made to resemble Maddie, although she felt a bit puzzled. Out of courtesy, Eliza still invited George to dinner. While preparing dinner, Eliza introduced the new guest to her husband Maddie. However, Maddie appeared nervous and insisted on immediately expelling him. Eliza thought his attitude was too rude and refused her husband's request. During dinner, George suddenly grabbed Eliza's arm and took his niece's hand to begin the prayer before the meal. After the prayer, George picked up a napkin and wrapped it around the meat on the plate. He squeezed out the grease from it. During this action, George looked as if he was about to vomit. He threw the meat back onto the plate and casually wiped his hands. Ignoring the utensils in front of him, he directly tore the meat into chunks with his hands. Before swallowing it, Eliza was very puzzled. Then, George suddenly stated that he had some household matters that required the nanny's help and needed her to go home with him. Eliza felt quite dissatisfied with this. After all, she relied heavily on this diligent nanny. It was because of the nanny's help in taking care of the child that she was able to return to the television station as a reporter. At this moment, the doorbell interrupted the awkward atmosphere. It turned out to be Maddie, who had been away on a business trip. He urgently summoned the brother-in-law back to inquire about the identity and purpose of the visitor. But the visitor slowly uttered a few strange words.
We're both good people, aren't we, Julian?
Before going to sleep, George found Eliza. It seemed like he had known Eliza for a long time. He even called her by her childhood nickname and knew that her mother had passed away long ago. But Eliza didn't think much of it. She quickly signed an employment agreement with the nanny to ensure her continued stay. The nanny was quite comfortable living in this house and gladly accepted the agreement. The only thing that worried them was Uncle George's resolute attitude. Eliza comforted that she would work with the nanny to to persuade George to let her stay at work. In the dead of night, the brother-in-law quietly sneaked into George's room, but found that he wasn't there. In a panic, he woke the sleeping Eliza, and first went to check the nanny's room, but didn't find George there. Then they hurried to the nursery. To their surprise, the crib was empty, while George occupied the crib that originally belonged to the child, and slept in it. His beloved son was thrown on the cold floor. Faced with this situation, despite her internal struggle, Eliza chose to tacitly accept this behavior to keep the nanny. When she woke up in the morning, Eliza carefully groomed herself, and even put on her cross necklace. At the dining table, she took the initiative to hold George's hand, and began the prayer before the meal. But after the meal, George still insisted on taking his niece away. However, the nanny expressed her desire to stay. George found it hard to believe his niece's choice, and threatened that next time he would bring his wife Sarah along. As he was leaving, he issued a stern warning to Eliza's family, accusing them of lacking the respect that God deserved. But the nanny's firm choice doubled Elisa's fondness for her. Before long, Maddie returned home after finishing work. Eliza excitedly told him that she had booked the church to hold a baptism ceremony for their baby son. Maddie went to check the nursery, and found that there was an extra chef doll hanging among the toys in the crib. Meanwhile, the nanny stood by the window, and noticed that her uncle had not left, but was standing downstairs across the street, muttering something to himself. On this day, they invited Eliza's physician to visit their home. The doctor believed that it was crucial for Eliza to face reality. After all, the loss of her son was an unchangeable fact. She shouldn't continue to comfort herself with a fake baby. Initially, she had suggested this treatment, with the hope of alleviating Eliza's grief. From Maddie, the doctor learned about their hiring of a nanny. Feeling uneasy, she went to check the nursery. Just as she was about to reach out to touch the baby, the nanny suddenly appeared and yanked her hair, pulling the doctor down to the floor. Then she ran out holding the baby. Later, when the doctor came to visit again, the nanny apologized to her, saying that she was worried that a stranger might steal the baby. After dinner, the doctor found the nanny, and was about to reveal the truth, when the brother-in-law happened to appear, and interrupted their conversation. The doctor had to tactfully suggest that the nanny look for new job opportunities, and leave the family. However, this made the nanny curious about the baby's death. As the doctor passed by the nursery, her curiosity compelled her to enter the room. The sight before her astonished her. The fake baby had turned into a real baby. Just as the doctor was immersed in this phenomenon, a wolfhound suddenly sprang out from behind her. Startled, she immediately ran downstairs. Fortunately, the brother-in-law quickly grabbed a bottle, and knocked the dog out. The nanny appeared extremely tense after witnessing this. After calling the police, they discovered that the dog didn't belong to anyone nearby. It seemed to have appeared out of thin air. The brother-in-law also confessed to the doctor about the switch from the fake baby to the real baby. Returning to the room, the nanny silently prayed as she faced the books alone. As they were parting, the brother-in-law wanted to help the doctor retrieve her clothes, but was astonished to find that the treated dog had actually woken up. It quickly ran out the door. Everyone present was taken aback. Not long after, Eliza participated in a company event with her family, and entrusted the child to her brother. At home, the brother-in-law stayed behind alone, enjoying a moment of tranquility, savoring food and wine. However, this calmness was a bit excessive. There was no sound at all from the nursery. He curiously went upstairs and gently rocked the crib, but he found that the baby in the crib didn't respond at all. When he turned on the light, he was shocked to discover that it wasn't a real baby, but a fake one. The brother-in-law was instantly panicked, and began to search every corner carefully, hoping to find the real child. He was worried that his sister, who had just begun to recover, would collapse again upon seeing the fake baby. When she returned home, the brother-in-law suspected that the nanny had taken the real child away, so he sought help from the private investigator accompanying the nanny. However, the investigator confirmed that the nanny didn't take the baby out. At this moment, the brother-in-law Maddie's phone rang at the right time. The brother-in-law planned to use this opportunity to tell him what was happening, but his sister suddenly appeared on the screen. The brother-in-law's mouth, which had just opened, closed again. Then, the nanny returned home early, and saw the fake baby on the floor. She calmly picked it up, as if she had anticipated this. This left the brother-in-law feeling puzzled and angry. He questioned the nanny about the whereabouts of the real baby, but she seemed indifferent and walked straight past him, leaving the brother-in-law fuming in place. The nanny's indifference made him decide to confront her. He bluntly stated that he knew the truth about the nanny's background, and threatened to speak with the manipulator behind her. However, the the nanny was completely unconcerned about this. The brother-in-law found himself in a dilemma, and finally he directly asked the nanny what her intentions were. He offered the nanny a sum of money, but she showed no interest at all. Instead, she said,
"Thank you for sitting with Jericho tonight."
Clearly, the nanny didn't want money, but the true cause of the baby's death. But the brother-in-law, in a frenzy, grabbed the fake baby and began to threaten her.
5, 4, 3, I'm gonna fucking do it!
The moment the fake baby fell, the sound of crying echoed in the air. The brother-in-law quickly got up and held the baby in his arms. Immediately after, he anxiously searched the room, with one hand holding a pot, and the other holding a spatula. He kept banging them together, while loudly calling the baby's name, like a clown in a circus, as if he were being pulled into an invisible game. Meanwhile, the nanny was exhausted from dealing with his chaotic behavior, as she prayed by the bed. Finally, the brother-in-law grew tired from his antics, and calmly walked toward the nanny, to explain the situation to her. When Eliza returned home, the one that had originally been a fake baby, had now turned into a real one. However, she didn't know that all of this was the result of her brother's chaos throughout the night. Later, the brother-in-law informed Maddie about the nanny knowing the secret. He was furious upon hearing this, but the brother-in-law showed a look of helplessness. Meanwhile, the nanny's expression became complex, revealing a deep-seated resentment. While organizing Eliza's clothes, the nanny, who had always been good with the mistress, deliberately displayed anger and pulled apart Eliza's necklace. Taking advantage of her moment of distraction, she quickly grabbed a pearl and hid it in her mouth. Why did this hidden truth make the nanny develop such deep hostility towards Elisa? It turned out that a few months ago, Eliza had finally welcomed her precious son, after several failed attempts at conception. This made her cherish the child even more. Like all mothers experience, her heart was warmed by this life. However, the pace of life didn't slow down due to the joy of the new birth. Maddie had to leave home for work for a week. During this time, Eliza took on the responsibility of caring for the baby alone. One day, Eliza returned home loaded with goods from the shopping center. She was busy organizing the items she had bought, but forgot the baby in the car. In the hot afternoon, the temperature soared to 42 degrees. After tidying up the items, she went to the nursery and carefully turned on the fan for the baby to prevent him from overheating. The hot weather kept her lying on the sofa, unwilling to move. She occasionally used the intercom to check if there was any sound from the nursery. It wasn't until evening that she entered the nursery. Looking at the empty room, she couldn't hide her shock. Then she realized she had made a terrible mistake. In a daze, she walked toward the car, but it was too late for everything. She could only take the baby out of the car. Under the dim orange light, Eliza walked slowly. The child in her arms was motionless. After bringing the baby home, Eliza smiled and teased the already dead child in her arms as usual. She even bathed him. One day, the ham Maddie ordered was delivered to their home. She didn't dare to let the delivery person see the baby in her arms who had already died, so she covered the baby tightly with a blanket. At this point, Eliza was already in a daze. A few days later, the ham had spoiled, along with the baby who had been dead for several days. Eliza continued to look at the baby. Although she knew the child had passed away, she was unwilling to face the harsh reality. Her husband called and said he still has a few days to go home. Eliza glanced at the baby in front of her and expressed her hope that her husband would come home soon. At this moment, Maddie was completely unaware of the changes that had occurred at home. He told his wife to be patient for a few more days until he finished his work here, and that he would definitely return home soon. Eliza's brother tried to contact her but was unsuccessful. Her sister would never act this way. She didn't answer calls or reply to messages. Noticing something unusual, he arrived at Eliza's house on a rainy day. The moment the nursery door was opened, the buzzing flies revealed a heartbreaking scene. Eliza's car continued to honk outside. No matter how she pressed the key, she couldn't stop the noisy alarm. The sound was like a warning bell, reminding her that the painful memories had not faded away. On a cold winter day, Eliza stepped outside in her pajamas. Amidst the surprised looks of those around her, she pressed the car key repeatedly, but the car still emitted the alarm. Eliza opened the back door to check. The pain of losing her child had clearly hit her hard. This was actually a prank by the nanny upstairs. She may have done this to make Eliza remember her mistake. When choosing a nanny back then, strange things had happened. Faced with a mountain of resumes on the table, Eliza didn't know how to choose. However, when she opened the resume of the current nanny, The intercom, which had been quiet for days, unexpectedly echoed with the sound of her son crying again. Perhaps this was the reason she chose this nanny. On this day, Maddie found the nanny again to taste the dish. He explained beforehand that today's dish was pufferfish. If not handled properly, the toxins in pufferfish blood could easily kill an adult. The nanny gathered her courage and put a piece of fish meat in her mouth to taste. However, the pungent taste made her spit out the fish. Maddie asked her to try again, but the nanny countered by asking him why she should stay with Eliza after the tragedy. Maddie replied,
If I'd been here, none of that would have happened. That was my mistake.
After receiving such an answer, the nanny put another piece of fish meat in her mouth to taste. This time, she swallowed the fish. A few days later, the couple held a solemn baptism ceremony for the baby at the church. The brother-in-law unintentionally discovered the nanny's relatives. George and Sarah appeared among the guests. Faced with this sudden discovery, the nanny was taken aback. It seemed she had foreseen something terrible. She immediately rushed toward the nursery, but she was too late. At this moment, Sarah was quietly sitting there, holding the baby. In front of Sarah, the nanny appeared particularly obedient. She insisted that the baby shouldn't have died so early. However, Sarah explained that this was God's arrangement for Eliza's fate. God intended for her to suffer. Eliza walked into the room, and Sarah's face looked so familiar to her. The nanny quickly introduced her as her aunt. Although Eliza was puzzled, she didn't probe further. After Eliza left, Sarah said a few meaningful words to the nanny.
Come home. Both of you.
Meanwhile, George found Maddie. The male lead thought he had come for money, and took out 2 bags full of cash. In his eyes, the nanny and her relatives were all there for their own financial gain. Unexpectedly, they were not interested in the money. George picked up a stack of cash, and held it to his nose to sniff. He wrinkled his nose and put the cash down, and said a few chilling words.
Who you welcomed into your home, Sean?
George revealed the secret of the nanny's origins. After the fire, to avoid unnecessary trouble, they decided to engrave her name on the tombstone. They raised her according to the beliefs they held. Maddie was curious why the nanny chose to come to his home. Originally, the nanny had seen Eliza when she was a child. Since then, the nanny had liked her, and thought Eliza was beautiful. She regarded her as an idol in her heart. Then, George's words touched the feelings that Maddie had long suppressed. How could he not feel pain? How could he not miss the child he had fought so hard to have? But his wife had already broken down. As the man of the house, he had to be strong, and buried his longing deep in his heart. Yet George's words deeply inspired him. Maddie followed George's guidance, and earnestly prayed to God for the miraculous revival of his son's life. After the baptism ceremony, the atmosphere was lively. The baptism banquet came to a successful end. Maddie found George to say that the child would always belong to them. Unexpectedly, George spoke a few cryptic words.
What is sown is perishable. What is raised is imperishable.
George's words left Maddie confused. As night fell, Eliza suddenly stopped moving. Her gaze froze. Then she hurried out of the bedroom and entered the living room, eagerly searching for an old interview video. In that video, she unexpectedly saw Sarah's figure. She was the widely sought-after cult leader. At this moment, Eliza's thoughts turned to the nanny. She quickly went to the nanny's room, only to find it empty. Only silence remained. After a sincere prayer, Maddie experienced a subtle change in his body. He was astonished to find that no matter how much his hand was burned by the fire, he felt no pain at all. Realizing that all of this was caused by the cult, he hurried toward the nursery. At this moment, the real baby had turned into a fake one. Meanwhile, the nanny had packed her bags and was heading toward their organization. She embraced her fellow members tightly. The overall framework of the American series Servant is based on the female protagonist finding a member of a cult organization as a nanny after losing her child, with a series of bizarre events and twists woven throughout the entire show. There are many highlights. The film warns people not to make grave mistakes due to momentary carelessness, and not to fall for cult beliefs. The consequences can be unimaginable. If you enjoy my channel, please click to subscribe.